Kale Orion had built an empire of chrome towers, floating cars, and neon-splashed restaurants that dotted the city like glowing stars, yet almost no one knew his face. To the world, he was a name whispered in boardrooms and financial networks, a ghost billionaire who preferred the shadows. Tonight, however, he wore the skin of a cook, grease-stained apron, tired eyes, and hands calloused by hours at the grill. He had slipped into this role not for fun but to see what life in his empire looked like from the ground. From where the workers struggled, sweated, and served. It was late when the last customer left and the restaurant's neon sign flickered into silence. The cleaning bots had already begun their humming rounds, sweeping crumbs into tiny vacuums. Kale moved slowly through the aisles, scanning for any sign of neglect, any corner where the staff might be pushed too far. He prided himself on knowing details, but tonight, something unexpected stopped him cold. In the far booth, tucked away beneath the dim light of a half-dead lamp, a young woman was asleep. Her head rested against the glass window, dark hair falling across her face. She wore the restaurant's standard waitress uniform, wrinkled and stained after a long shift, her shoes still on as if she had simply collapsed where exhaustion had claimed her. Kale frowned. None of the managers had mentioned this. He stepped closer, his footsteps soft against the polished floor. She stirred slightly, murmuring something under her breath, and that was when he noticed her hands. They trembled in her sleep, clenching the edge of her apron as though she was holding onto more than fabric, holding onto survival itself. She couldn't have been more than 20, her face young but shadowed with fatigue far older than her years. Kale hesitated. It wasn't unusual for workers in the city to burn out, to take on multiple jobs just to stay alive. But sleeping here, in his restaurant, after hours, that meant something deeper. No home. No place safe enough to rest. He studied her a moment longer, his disguise heavy on him. For a man who owned fleets of hover shuttles and penthouses in orbiting towers, he felt strangely powerless standing over one sleeping waitress. He should have woken her, called a manager, followed protocol. Instead, Kale found himself quietly pulling a folded thermal blanket from the staff locker and draping it across her shoulders. She shivered once, then settled, her breathing steadying into the rhythm of deep sleep. He watched her for a moment, curiosity mixing with an emotion he hadn't expected, concern. Something about her didn't fit into the ordinary struggles of the city. Something told him this was just the beginning of a story he hadn't planned on discovering. The next evening, Kale returned earlier than usual, his thoughts still tangled with the image of the waitress asleep in the booth. He had expected her to be gone by morning, maybe even fired for breaking company policy, but when the shift began, there she was again, carrying trays and weaving between tables with practiced ease. Her smile was polite, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived through storms no one else could see. Kale worked quietly at the grill, stealing glances, waiting for a moment when she might reveal more of herself. When the restaurant emptied and the doors locked, he lingered in the shadows. She stayed behind again, cleaning slower than necessary, her movements heavy, almost reluctant to leave. As the hum of the cleaning bots filled the room, Kale stepped out from behind the counter. "You should go home," he said softly. Her head snapped toward him, eyes sharp and alert, as if expecting an attack. For a second, Kale thought she might run. But instead, she sighed and sank into the booth where he'd found her the night before. "This is home," she whispered. Kale froze, not because of her words, but because of what followed. As she pressed her hands against her face, faint lines of light rippled across her skin, veins glowing with a bluish energy that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The glow faded almost instantly, leaving only pale fingers trembling in the dim light. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're not ordinary, are you?" She looked up at him then, eyes wide and glassy with unshed tears. "Please. Don't tell anyone." Her voice cracked, carrying fear so raw it cut through Kale's practiced composure. "They're looking for me. If they find me, I won't survive." Kale's mind raced. He had seen things in his time: corporate experiments, rumors of hybrid projects designed in hidden labs, whispers of technology fused with living beings. But never had one of those whispers sat before him, disguised in a waitress uniform, begging for silence. "Who's looking for you?" he asked carefully. She shook her head, curling her arms around herself. "You don't want to know. If you get involved, you'll end up like me." Her words were laced with warning, but her voice betrayed desperation. Kale studied her, the weight of his own secret pressing against him. He wasn't just a cook, and he wasn't going to stand by. He didn't know what she was hiding or why, but he knew one thing for certain: the glow in her veins wasn't the only thing dangerous here. The shadows outside were already watching. The rain drummed against the glass walls of the restaurant as the city outside pulsed with neon haze. Kale had spent the entire day distracted, his mind returning again and again to the girl with the glowing veins. When the shift ended, he found her once more in the corner booth, staring out at the streets as though expecting someone or something to appear. This time, she didn't flinch when he approached. Instead, she looked at him with the quiet resignation of someone tired of running. "My name's Nova," she said at last, her voice barely audible over the hum of the cleaning bots. The name suited her: luminous, dangerous, a star trying to hide in the dark. Kale sat across from her, waiting. She studied him for a long moment, as though deciding if he could be trusted. Then she pulled back her sleeve, revealing faint scars etched along her arm. Beneath the skin, the faint glow stirred again, stronger now, threading through her veins like liquid light. "I wasn't born like this," she whispered. "I was made." Kale leaned forward, his expression unreadable. She spoke quickly then, as though once the words left her lips she could never take them back. She told him about Helix Corp, a rival conglomerate infamous for its secrecy. How they had taken children from the outer sectors, promising them better lives, only to turn them into living experiments. Nova had been one of their successes, an engineered hybrid capable of manipulating energy fields, a weapon disguised in human skin. But when she discovered the truth of what they planned for her, she escaped, vanishing into the labyrinth of the city. "They want me back," she said bitterly. "Not because I'm important, but because I'm valuable. I'm property to them." Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of the table. "If they find me, they'll finish what they started." Kale's chest tightened. He knew Helix Corp's reputation, knew their thirst for control, but hearing it from her lips gave it a weight no rumor ever had. He thought about revealing who he truly was, that he wasn't just a cook but the man who owned the Orion chain she worked in. That he had power enough to shield her. But something stopped him. If she thought he was just another worker, maybe she would trust him more. Instead, he said, "Then you're not alone anymore." Nova's eyes widened at the words, hope flickering where fear had ruled. But Kale noticed the faint red gleam of surveillance drones circling outside in the rain. Her secret was no longer just hers. And Helix Corp was already closing in. The night broke open with the sound of shattering glass. The restaurant's alarms wailed as a squad of black armored enforcers stormed through the doors, weapons glowing with the same cold blue light Kale had seen in Nova's veins. She jumped to her feet, her eyes wide with terror, while Kale instinctively stepped in front of her. The lead enforcer's voice boomed through a modulator, flat and merciless. "Return the asset, no one else has to get hurt." Nova's breath hitched, her body trembling, and Kale knew running was no longer an option. For weeks he had hidden behind the mask of a cook, but disguise was useless now. With one motion, he tore the apron from his chest and tapped the small device embedded under his wrist. His civilian clothes shimmered, shifting into sleek black armor lined with neon silver, a shielded combat suit far beyond civilian tech. The enforcers froze for a split second, taken aback. "You picked the wrong place," Kale said, his voice carrying a weight of authority that no cook could muster. "This is Orion territory." The realization hit them, even through their visors. He wasn't just a worker protecting a girl, he was Kale Orion himself, the phantom CEO who controlled half the city's sky. Their hesitation gave him the opening he needed. With a flick of his wrist, a shield of crackling energy expanded around him and Nova, absorbing the first volley of plasma fire. The restaurant lit up in flashes of blue as bolts ricocheted off the barrier. Nova clutched his arm, her own glow stirring beneath her skin. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because they don't own you," Kale answered, his eyes locked on the advancing soldiers. Something inside her broke free at his words. The glow surged, flooding her veins like liquid fire. She raised her hands, and the air rippled. The enforcers staggered as their weapons flickered and died, shorted out by the sudden distortion field she unleashed. Energy bent and cracked in her wake, warping light, bending sound. The power frightened her, but Kale stood firm, steadying her with a hand on her shoulder. Together, they pushed back. He struck with precision, his armor enhancing every move, while she unleashed raw waves of energy that tore through the room like invisible storms. Within minutes, the enforcers were retreating, dragged out by their leader with promises of return. The alarms fell silent, leaving only the sound of Nova's ragged breathing. She looked at him, stunned. "You're not who I thought you were." Kale's armor dimmed as he deactivated it, his face calm but resolute. "Neither are you. Now we both know the truth." The city skyline glittered in the distance, towers piercing the night like crystal spears, their neon reflections bleeding into the wet streets below. Nova stood on the rooftop of the restaurant, the wind pulling strands of her hair across her face, her body still humming with the aftershocks of the power she had unleashed. For the first time in months, she wasn't running. But the quiet didn't feel like peace, it felt like the pause before another storm. Kale joined her, his armor folded back into a sleek coat, his presence calm yet commanding. She studied him in silence, still grappling with the revelation that the man she thought was a cook was, in truth, the CEO of Orion Enterprises. "You lied," she said finally, though her voice lacked accusation. It carried only confusion. "I had to see the world from the ground," Kale replied. "Too many at the top forget what it's like down here. I didn't expect to find you." He turned his gaze toward the sky, where red drones still blinked faintly in the distance, scouting, searching. "Helix 1T stop. They've invested too much. They come harder, stronger, and they burn anyone in their way." Nova wrapped her arms around herself. "Then maybe I should leave. Keep moving until they can't find me." Kale shook his head. "That's exactly what they want, for you to live as prey, always hiding. But you're not prey, Nova. You're proof of what they've done, and the only way to stop them is to show the world." She turned to him, fear warring with a flicker of resolve. "You'd risk your company, your life, for me." "For the truth," Cale said firmly. "And for you. You're not just an experiment. You're a person. You deserve more than running." For the first time since he met her, Nova allowed herself to breathe deeply, the weight on her chest lifting ever so slightly. The thought of fighting back terrified her, but standing beside him, she felt something she hadn't in years: safety. She nodded slowly. "Then we fight together." A small smile touched Cale's lips. Together. They stood side by side, watching as the night sky shifted, dark clouds parting to reveal a sharp sliver of moonlight. Below them, the city pulsed with energy, millions of lives unaware of the war brewing above their heads. Helix would come, Cale knew. But so would their chance to strike first. As Nova's hand glowed faintly in the moonlight, Cale clasped it, sealing an unspoken pact. Whatever came next, they would face it not as Billionaire and Waitress, not as weapon and master, but as allies bound by choice. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to claim.